one for us when we needed him to make that call that won the game for us. And I think in particular of throwing the challenge flag in the Minnesota game and taking time off the clock that we needed, and what just a poor decision. And these are the kind of things and if I could balance that with one play call at the end of the game in a 2-minute drill that really outsmarted the defense and put us in a position to kick the field goal. I mean, we did have a chance to kick a field goal against the Vikings and win that game, but it wasn't because of any play calling. So I'm really looking to see that, and I think he's capable of it. He's got plenty of experience offensively, but just didn't see it this year. And I don't want to say this as if Coach McCarthy doesn't have anything going against him. It's not like there isn't another good team on the field, and the fact of the matter is many of the teams we've played this season are better teams than we are in a lot of ways, but we still have to see that. We still expect that from our head coach. So it goes out as a challenge, not so much a criticism. I don't mean for it to be negative, but I hope that we see at the end of this season, Coach McCarthy scheme this team into position to really feel like they have the confidence in the staff and the coaches and believe that this team can go somewhere. Number two, Ted Thompson, I've heard, and this was from the Lambeau Live or Locker Room Live crew, finally say something. No, this was from WTMJ. People finally getting to the point where they say Ted Thompson has to answer some tough questions. I have asked tough questions of Ted Thompson since the very beginning. Since this off season, I have said, this is now his team. He has ousted everyone he felt like ousting. He has gotten rid of everyone from Brett Favre on down. He has gotten rid of the people that he didn't like, that didn't kiss his boots, and didn't shine his shoes. Ted Thompson's team is on the field every single week. We have watched him make good draft selections. Now we are seeing all of his draft selections basically on the field. I mean, this is not without a few exceptions, but for the most part, this is Ted Thompson's team. No one can argue with that point. And now it is time for every single failure of Ted Thompson, for every player that he has to kick off the team, for every player he's got to trade, for every player that he's got to get rid of, this is a mark on his record. And I don't think anyone, aside from myself, that I ever heard had mentioned the fact that Ted Thompson, because he builds the team through the draft, will have to answer for his draft picks, not just the good ones. And I've always been a supporter of Ted Thompson as a very, very good judge of talent, really above average. But there are always going to be problems. There are always going to be some guys that don't get the job done. And we have seen that time and time again on our offensive line, and we've seen it in several places. We've seen guys he's brought in. Is this team honestly not missing Abdul Hodge as a backup linebacker right now? Is this team really, not missing some of these guys we let go, like KGB, who, for all intents and purposes, was very serviceable and perhaps was just slowed by his knee injury, not healing completely? There are a lot of questions that Ted Thompson has to answer, and this is now his team, so all the questions fall squarely on his shoulders. I've questioned his belief that you always, without a doubt, pick the best player available. I've questioned it on two levels. A, if there are two players that are very close together, and you pick the best player available, even though he's another wide receiver or another quarterback, is that really what's best for the Green Bay Packers this past offseason? Not necessarily. If you have two players that are close and you can get one that will really improve your team and add depth, you should pick that player over the best player available. And B, this is the second reason that I've criticized him. He does not pick the best player available all the time anyway. He goes against his own self-stated philosophy. Ted Thompson did not pick two quarterbacks in this draft just because they happen to be the greatest guys floating to the top of his board at the time. So we've seen this, And we've seen it, and we've seen it, and he has to answer for this. This is not, you need to balance your philosophy with the reality that's out there. And he does it anyway. Because of some of the players we've seen him pick, we know that he does not always pick the best player available. Competition in training camp, the only time Ted Thompson has circumvented his own self-stated philosophy that we get competition in training camp. The better players we have in every position and the more of them we have, the better because of the competition. He did not bring in Brett Favre, who would have been great competition for Aaron Rodgers. And if Aaron Rodgers was as good as Ted Thompson and Mike McCarthy thought he would have beat out Brett Favre. Everyone knew Aaron Rodgers could not beat out Brett Favre. It just could not happen. Brett Favre is a much better quarterback. So he went against his self-stated philosophy there. Finally, building through the draft. There's no balance in Ted Thompson's philosophy. He only builds through the draft, and then he's picked up one, two, Brandon Chiller, Charles Woodson, a great pickup, but hasn't he learned from those great pickups like Charles Woodson that if you're careful and you go out in free agency and you get the job done, that you can have a better team because of it. The best player on our defense is not A.J. Hawk, it's not Montgomery, it's not Cullen Jenkins. The best player is Charles Woodson, a free agent draft pick. The second best player on our defense, although he's kind of disappeared of late, is Ryan Pickett. He is our run stopper, and he's been disappearing of late, but he is as good as it gets back there. Now I know Al Harris you could throw in there too, but Al Harris is not a Ted Thompson draft pick. So there are a lot of problems with Ted Thompson and the way he has handled this team. And I'm going to go on from here. I've got a few more rants. I know it's getting a little negative. I don't mean for it all to be negative, and I promise to end on a positive note. But we will do that in part 2 of this podcast when you come back right here on the Atrium.